Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. And as I mentioned, it's really nice to have Sima here in person. So thanks for being here. And everybody, as I said, is welcome to join us in person or join us on Zoom, whichever way works for you. We know some people live a little further away, so we're glad to be able to accommodate for those or at work. But just wanted to give a shout out to Sima. Thanks for joining us in person. So we are up to page 206, day 68, and we're almost finished chapter 7. But I just want to, I had an inspiration this morning, and I want to talk about my inspiration that I had this morning while I was learning my daf, right? So daf yomi, is the daf yomi, learning a daily page of Talmud every day. And I'm a little behind. I do it on my own pace. I eventually always catch up. Thank God for Shabbos. Could do a couple pages on Shabbos. But I'm a little behind. But the discussion that the Talmud is talking about is a very interesting discussion regarding the witnesses that came to testify about the new moon, right? So every month, right, now we have our calendar. You go to luach.com, right? You can even download it and integrate it into your, into your Google Calendar, right? So we like, it's Rosh Chodesh, great, right? But it's really all over the place, right? But in the good old days, right, what they used to do is they used to have witnesses come and testify that they saw the new moon. And there was questions, and they had to make sure that they saw it properly. Was it the sky? Was it here? Was it the right? Was it at the left? Right? High up in the sky, low in the sky. And of course, it made a difference what time of year it was, right? And, those are different questions that the rabbis would, the Beis Din, the courthouse, would ask the witnesses. But the Mishnah tells us something very interesting, that sometimes they got two witnesses, because you have to have at least one set of witness, or sometimes you got a whole bunch of witnesses, a whole bunch of people. So it was a clear, beautiful sky, right? A couple of nights ago, we had a beautiful, clear sky, right? You could see it from miles away. And don't forget, back then they didn't have, all this electric lights outside, so you were able to see the sky much clearer, right? And had a whole bunch of witnesses that came. So what do you do then? So who do you take first, right? So the famous rule of everything: first come, first serve, right? The first pair of witnesses that came, right, they would question them first. If they were legitimate witnesses and they answered all the questions correctly, and the interrogation is too harsh of a word, because we think interrogation is a negative thing, right? But after the Beis Din interrogated them to make sure that there were legitimate witnesses and they knew what they were talking about, so then if the first peer evaded them, so they'd say Mekudash, they'd say, oh, holy. Right? If for whatever reason there was a problem with these witnesses, be it if they were there were family members, so family members can be witnesses, and they didn't realize, or they had a different problem, that they were not kosher witnesses, the whole law of what makes someone a kosher witness, right? Or they were kosher witnesses, but they didn't pass the test. Their story didn't match up properly, right? They would each one separately, right? It didn't match up properly. For whatever reason, the Beis Din said we can't use them, so then they'll go to the next peer and the next peer until they finally found a peer that was good. So the Mishnah says like this. The Mishnah says that if they found the first peer, right? If they found the first peer as a good peer, so what do we do with the rest of the witnesses, right? So the Mishnah says something fascinating. The Mishnah says that Beis Din would still question all the witnesses. They'll go. Let's say there was 100 peers that came. There were 2 peers that came. Right? The Beis Din would go and question all the peers of witnesses. They would do a more of not an in-depth questioning, right? Because we already know that it's Mekudash. But they would go and ask all so the Talmud asks, why are we doing this? Right? Like, why? Right? Why are you going through all the witnesses? So, it's good to see you, Sherry. All right, thanks for joining us. It's nice to have a small crowd back. Sima and Sherry here. Thanks for joining us. All right. So the Talmud asks, why do they do this? Right? Why do they go through all the witnesses? Once they have a mikudas, once they have a good pair of witnesses, why do they have it? So the Talmud says something very fascinating, and Rashi explains and I'm going to give Rashi's explanation. And this gave me a tremendous inspiration today, this morning when I was doing my daf. That Rashi explains the Talmud that says is because we don't want them to feel that they came for nothing. We don't want them to feel that they came for nothing. You're right. Once the first pair was good, that's it. They don't need any more. Beis could say, "Oh, thanks, but you snooze, you lose," right? Or "Thanks for coming, but maybe next time," right? But the Beis didn't want, right? It's called takanas ha'edim, right? Because of the takana, means to say to lift up and to make them feel like they're worthy something, to make them feel that their schlep out was not for anything. Right, so they would go ahead and question all of them, and then after they questioned all of them, they would say mikudash. Right, so they don't know which one was the one that was the good Edom. Right, they knew the first one was, and therefore the other Edom they don't go into too much detail. They could sort of do it more, they could do it quicker, but at the same time they don't want the Edom to feel like, okay, I slept here. I came all the way. Don't forget, back then they didn't have, transportation was a little harder. They had to go to Jerusalem. So even if they lived in Jerusalem, it was still, now we hop in a car and from, Har Nof to the old city is, 25 minutes without traffic, right? But if it's a 25-minute drive, so it's at least a 2-hour walk. I actually have walked to Har Nof, right, from the Jerusalem area. It's about an hour and a half, 2-hour walk. And then if anybody lives a little further, right, it's a bigger schlep. So the Beis Din didn't want people to feel that their effort and their schlepping out to be part of this mitzvah and to go and help the Jewish people. It's really sort of being like a volunteer, right, going to help the Jewish people to make sure that they have witnesses to sanctify the new moon. The Beis Din spent their time. And their time, every second was, everybody's time is important. But they were dealing with laws and they're the courthouse, right? And every second makes a difference. But they went ahead and they spent their time to go ahead and speak to every peer of Edom. And this gave me a tremendous inspiration this morning. I know we're learning the Lashon Hara, right? And the laws of Lashon Hara. But part of that, as we explained, is also the learning of Ben Adam L'Chavera, how to take care of other people, right? That we spoke about if you're able to forgive other people. That's what we spoke about at the end of last week, right? And I think this is a tremendous insight into the importance of showing the dignity for other people, that every person matters, right? Every person makes a difference. It's not like, oh, we don't need you anymore, so you're done. Thanks for showing up, right? But your service is not needed anymore. No. We wanted to make sure everybody felt that their service was needed, right? And they didn't know exactly which peer was the one that was okay, right? And they knew that was a process. So you could say, oh, it's sort of like a trick. No, it was a way of showing that we're going to spend our time to legitimize each individual and say we're going to give you the time of day. And I think if we work on this, each one of us, that we show every individual that we interact with, be it if it's a stranger in an elevator, right, or on an airplane, right? Sometimes, your neighbor in the airplane doesn't want you to talk to them, right? I'm a little more on the talkative side on airplanes, right? But if I get it that they're not interested in talking, I keep quiet. As you guys know, I can be a little talkative sometimes, right? But be it as if it's someone you meet somewhere or in an office, if it's someone that's very low on the if it's someone on very low on the totem pole in the office hierarchy, or in Kiddush or on the block or whatever it is, right? To show that importance and to dignify each individual, you have to show them that they matter, right? And I think if we work on this, right, if we all work on showing that each person matters, I think this could, change, really curve a lot of the maybe anti-Semitism, not the anti-Semitism. Sorry, that was the wrong word. I had a conversation with someone the other day about anti-Semitism. It's popping from my head, right? But the sinat chinam, the base hatred, this connection of our brethrens of humanity, right? Because we're showing that each person does matter. And I might not know you, and I might not, be on the same, We might not hang out all the time together, but at least I respect you as an individual, and I'm going to give you the time of day. If you slept out here, I'll give you the time of day to say hello to you. I'll give you the time of day to ask you where you're from, or whatever it is, or what brings you here, or whatever the opportunity is, right? At least you're dignifying the person, that you realize that they're there, and they're not just a fly on the wall. And I think that's something that we could all work on. I know myself too. And that's an inspiration I just wanted to share before we start class today. Just wanted to share an inspiration that I had this morning. Yes, go ahead, Bonnie.
Rabbi Abraham Palms, that's Al. He was an amazing rabbi and such a sweet, sweet neshama. So he was leaving the yeshiva, and he had walked several steps down the street, and then he said to the person with him, I need to go back. He went back to say good morning to the janitor.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
That's exactly, mimicking and living this lesson. And there's many other great stories of great rabbis and individuals, right? Great individuals that have, since you're talking about, a story, there's a very famous story with Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, of blessed memory, he got out of Europe before the war. He actually moved to Canada first. Yeah, Canada, right? In Toronto, and then he moved to New York. And he was a great Rosh Hashiva, great rabbi, one of our big rabbis. And at his funeral, right, there was a group of nuns that were at his funeral, right? So, we were like a little, okay, this will look a little strange, like one of our great rabbis, and there's a group of nuns at his funeral, right? So, after the funeral, whatever, people started talking and said, when we heard that this great rabbi passed away, we felt we had to come. Every morning he would walk by, right, his way to yeshiva, to the study hall, he would walk by, and we would be usually just the way it works. We'd be outside and whatever, and he would always say good morning to us. Right? Every morning it didn't make a difference who they were. He would said, if someone from the opposite, faith and whatever, a rabbi could every morning say good morning to us. When we heard, we had to come to his funeral, right? And there's other, great stories like this, because this is really living Torah. This is what Torah really is all about, right? You see it integrated in our law, right? Of checking the witnesses for the new moon, right? Which you're going to have a whole bunch of witnesses coming, integrated in our law and who we are, right? Of this important thing of always, building up and recognizing each individual for who they are. Martha, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question. Okay, so when you were talking about the new moon and testifying, you said something about a pair.
Yeah, so two witnesses, right? So
they have to agree.
There have to be two. Yeah, in Jewish law, right? In Jewish law, great question. In Jewish law, witnesses for anything except for monetary, and depends on what kind of monetary, but witnesses are always two, right? And it has to be humans. It can be a video, it can be DNA or things like that. It has to be a human testimony, and Beis Din interrogates each one separately to make sure that they have their stories right, because if it actually didn't happen, usually you could catch someone in a lie, right? Because you can't get all the details together, and it has to be two. They both have to be same. It can't be, we rely on this one and not that one, right? There has to be two, and there's rules of who's a kosher witness. If someone has done a certain avirot, which I'm not getting into the whole laws of, there's a whole section in the Code of Jewish Law, right? He's not considered a kosher witness. As I said, family members can be kosher witnesses, and other scenarios, what could be, what can't, but a peer means to say it's always two. Witnesses always have to be two. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, so let's get cracking. So thank you for allowing me to share my inspiration I had this morning. So we are on page 206, day 68, the last lesson in chapter 7, which is, again, the chapter of forgiveness. As we explained, this is the name of the chapter is not necessarily referring with the halacha, but it's more in the growing part, which is on the other side, right? So this is the last day of this chapter. So let's see the last case, and this again along the same lines as the other cases, sort of finishing off this idea, right? So the case is like this: you call a childhood friend to whom you haven't spoken in months. right? I think we all have that, right? I have some friends that I haven't spoken to in a little while, right? I think it's been now a little more than months, right? When I used to go to Toronto, I used to see them, right? But I haven't been in Toronto in 2.5 years, right? Almost 3 years. So, that's what happens in life. One lives in Montreal, one lives in Passaic, some live in Toronto, right? So for whatever reason you decide to call them up, right? You're both catching up with the events in each other's lives. When your friend mentioned that his younger brother was kicked out of yeshiva and has begun dabbling in drugs, right? Do you bear responsibility for hearing this lashon hara? So again, they always go to the extreme, right? And again, as we spoke about in the past, the cases are more to sort of give us a broader scenario to be able to find different things in here. Go ahead, Emily. I see your hands up.
I'm not understanding what the question is. Like, do you like hit yourself and say I sinned because the person said it? Is that the question? Like, do you say like I did Nevera because the person said that to me? Is that what they're asking?
Okay, good. I'm not going to answer that question yet. What do you guys think? What do you think, Suzette? Go ahead.
I personally struggled with this because I can't see why this is even termed in that context of lashon hara. To me, it just reads, and I know you said that this is to give us a broader perspective and put things in a wider framework. But to me, it just looks like, a story being shared with a close friend. And regardless of what the content seems to be, I can't see why it even falls into that category. When I think about it, it sounds to me as if, we can, if I look at it through that very narrow lens, can I ever be in a position where I can share somebody's, personal grief if it involves someone else without being guilty of lashon hara? So that's my comment.
Okay. First of all, can you guys hear what people are saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that you guys. Okay, so let me repeat over. Emily, number one is asking, right? Just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And Emily started off the conversation by asking, like, what is the question over here? What is it? Every time you hear something, you're responsible for lashon hara, right? Like what is? I think, am I correct? Like, what are you supposed to do? Like, what is it like? They decided to say something to you, right? I mean, Emily, is that your question?
Well, I know that my question is that what the book is asking? My question is what is the book? What is the question the book is asking? Because I know like listening to lashon hara is not okay. I mean, sometimes people just like say it to you and you didn't even see it coming and too late. Like, but if they feel comfortable saying it to you, so maybe you need to work on yourself that they don't feel comfortable saying it to you in the first place. But is the book asking like, did you just mess up? Is that what the book is asking?
Yeah, so that is what the book's asking. Emily asking, is that what the book's asking? That mean that do you bear responsibility? That's what the book is asking. Right? Do you bear responsibility? The question is, what is the background behind the question, right? And so that's what we're going to get to you in a minute. Right? What is the background behind the question, right? Because the book is asking, did you listen? It's not asking, did you hear lashon hara, right? Because you heard lashon hara, right? It's asking, do you bear responsibility, right, for hearing lashon hara? Right? So it means to say, are you getting the transgression, right, aveira, right, of hearing lashon hara, right, or not? Because the book is not asking, did you hear lashon hara? Because you did hear lashon hara. And Suzette, we're going to get to your question in a second, right? But the book is asking, do you bear responsibility for hearing lashon hara, right? So it's more of a lead-on question. It's not. It's not really. It's as you're going to see in the answer. It's really a question more to bring out a point than actually a deep philosophical discussion. But Jim, just give me a minute. Let me just respond back to Suzette. So we spoke about this before, and this is something very important to remember. Yes, it is important to be able to have a conversation with your friend, right, or your spouse even. Actually talking to someone this morning, right, after davening, and somehow we came up. I said, the Talmud tells us that sometimes that people, I'm going to say the words, but I don't mean to be so harsh, right? But a lot of people go to Gehenna, right? To what quote unquote we call hell, right? But Gehenna is not what we think hell is, right? Because of the lashon hara that's spoken between a man and wife, right? So even a man and wife, even husband and wife, right, have to be careful of what we say and what we don't say. There's no just a free for all, and I know you didn't mean a free for all, but I'm just using my words a little more loose, right? Just because we're good friends, just because we're your husband and wife, right? You still have to be careful with the words that you say and how you say it. If someone needs to get something off their chest, right? We spoke about this in an earlier part of the book, right? You need to go to therapy, or you need to have a good conversation with your spouse, your husband, or your wife, right? Regarding something that happened. There are ways of saying it, right? Either leaving out the name of the person, right? Leaving out some details that the person will be able to find. There has to be that this is really something that has been weighing on you, and it's something that really need to get off, not just, giving information. Oh, just, oh yeah, my brother, he's messed up, right? Actually, my brothers are all great, right? But my brother's, he's messed up, and there's no need for you to know. There's no toelis. You're not going to help. He's just making conversation. We call that, to a certain degree, gossip, right? Even if it's just with a friend or someone you're catching up with, there is no need for that negative information about this individual to come out. So when there is no purpose besides just having a conversation and just catching up, right? Then that falls under lashon hara. That or rakilas, even if it's true, right? Lashon hara is when it's not true. Rakilas is when it is true, right? But we're just.
Or I think the opposite. Isn't lashon hara when it's true?
Yeah, sorry. Lashon hara is when it is true. Rakilas when it's not true. Thank you. Right? You're right. Thank you, Emily. Right? But what's it called? But when you just if there's a purpose, so then we go back to the rules of toelis. If there's a reason behind why you need to say this, right? And we've gone through the different levels of toelis, and we spend weeks on this, right? And I put out a chart, and I'll be happy to send it to you if I have to find it. But the different levels and the categories of toelis. A reason why, if it falls under those categories, then you're allowed to say it. And even when you do say it, you have to try as much as you can to minimize either the information or minimize the person, if you need it more just to get it off your chest, right? And that falls under the rules of toelis, right? So then don't say who it is, right? And again, I'm not going through the whole ways of doing it, but just because you want to have a conversation, or just because you want to, talk about something or catch up, that doesn't give us the right to say something negative about someone else, even if it's true. Does that help?
It helps.
Go ahead.
And I'll let you continue, but it seems that it gives you a very narrow framework of, conversation or relationships with, individuals. But it does help, but it really narrows the.
So, believe it or not, I highly recommend, and I try this very often also. I highly recommend to try, right? I guess, unless, you're talking about your kid's teacher or whatever, what your kids did or your friend's kid did, or something that happened at work that you need to really have a conversation about, it's something that makes a difference. But I'm telling you, if you try to have only positive, it doesn't have to be positive. I mean, everything's positive, but you try not to have in your conversation, talk about negative about someone else when there's no purpose for it. I'm telling you, you'll find there's so much to talk about. You can talk about a vacation. You can talk about your kids. You can talk about, what projects you're working on at work. You can talk about, if you're a Jags fan, wow, they won another game. Right? Let's make a celebration. Right? But whatever it is, or just talking amongst yourselves. Right? Believe it or not, there is a lot to talk about. We're talking over here like this. There is no reason for your friend to tell you that his brother's doing drugs, right? Like, why is that necessary to say that? How did your day become brighter? How did you become more informative, right? If for whatever reason, you're going to hang out with your friend, his brother, or you're whatever, you're planning on having him for work, so then there's a purpose for it, right? But otherwise, you could just say, "Hey, how's my brother? He's doing this, he's doing that. He's my brother. And leave it at that, right?" But there's other things to talk about, right? Besides, talking about negative things. And yes, just like we can't eat certain things, right? And we can't do certain things on Shabbos, and we can't, certain business practices are not good, right? So too, there are certain things that we can't talk about. 100% correct. We are limiting our talk, right? And because talk is powerful, and talk creates, and talk is spiritual, and we have to make sure that we keep it that way. So you are correct. We are limiting to a certain degree, but you'll find that it's actually when you change this mindset, right? You'll find that there is a lot of positive things to talk about. Jim, go ahead. Sorry, I know you're waiting. Then Bonnie, and then Emily.
Thank you for that sermon, Rabbi. Okay, so I'm saying this from a social worker perspective. I think Emily's question was really good. If someone just kind of blurts it out, there's nothing you can really do about that, okay? Other than if they start it again and you don't want to hear it, to stop them. Now, from one perspective, if this is your friend and your friend is having something that is bothering them, as a friend, it's okay to have them vent, because they may be asking for help, asking for some guidance. What do I do? My brother is having all these issues, and it's really tough, and I feel bad. So to me, in that case, that isn't Lashon Hara. That can just be being a good friend and trying to help somebody.
So first of all, to answer your first point, you're 100% correct, and we have to get to the answer. Right, but we will get to the answer in a couple of minutes. Just want to take everybody's question, not to give away the answer, but you're correct. If you just hear something, right, it depends on your reaction regarding if you're responsible or not responsible. We'll talk about that in a minute. Regarding your second point, that's they're very careful with their scenario, and as I mentioned before, this is not the Torah, so we don't have to dissect everything they say, but they've said it's not someone that it's not someone you've talked to in a long time, right? It's not you're necessarily your confidant, right? It's not a therapist. It's not someone that is your job is not a drug rehabilitation person or whatever it is, right? It's just you're catching up on things. So yes, if this is someone that's your confidant, if it's someone that will be able to help you, so we spoke about that it falls under toelis to a certain degree. How you present it, right? How you present it will make a difference. How much information you need to give to be able to get the help. And if you are someone that is able to help, if you're someone that cannot help, right? If you're someone that has no knowledge of how to help someone that's taking drugs or whatever it is, right? So then yes, your brother needs to vent. So then he needs to go to someone that will be able to help him with the venting. If he needs to vent to Stam, so then we spoke about this, right? Go out for a drink and talk more in a vague way, right? As someone I know, right, dealing with drugs, it's really hard. Someone I'm close to, right? You could maybe figure out, maybe not figure out, because there's a couple of people. You still have to be careful as the individual that is speaking, even if you just need to vent, right? And it's someone that you're really close with and someone that you talk to a lot, you still have to be careful. Just because you need to vent doesn't give you the right to talk negative about someone else, right?
Okay, let me.
So you have to, let's give me 1 second. You still have to say it in a way that is more vague. Now, if this person's a professional and it's someone that can help this person, so that falls back under the category of toelis. There are scenarios where you could say something, and there are scenarios where you can't say something. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, one other factor, there's no way to figure this out from the short thing that is written. I think a lot of it depends what's in your heart. If the person, you don't know if the person telling you this is looking for help or not, or it is Lashon Hara, or it is Lashon Hara. Two different things. And there's, it's my turn.
I stopped. I stopped. Go ahead. I saw you.
It was tough. I commend you. That was good. But you really only Hashem knows what's in your heart. And if you're saying it because if you're the person talking about your brother and you're saying it because you want help, that's very different than if you're truly gossiping. Right? And none of us are going to figure that out here.
Jim, you're 100% correct. We're not necessarily talking about this scenario. We're talking about in general, right? This is a scenario to work from, right? But there's 2 points. There's the person that's speaking and then the person that's hearing it. Over here, we just ask, they use this case just to find out the person that's hearing it, is there a transgression going on or not? We sort of got off to a new topic, which is a great topic, and thank you, Zeph, for bringing this up. And is this even Lashon Hara? We made the assumption, this case made the assumption that it is Lashon Hara. It asked the person that's listening to it, do they bear responsibility for hearing Lashon Hara? Right, so that asks, why is this Lashon Hara? So what I'm saying is that it depends on, I just pointed out the reason why they made the assumption. The reason why they are saying that this is Lashon Hara is based off the case that they said it's not something that you typically talk to. It's been a little while, right? But the rules are, right, whatever the case is, regarding the person that's speaking, one that's speaking has to be careful, right? That even if you just need to get something off your chest or you have an opportunity to catch up with someone and you just want to give some information, not everything is permitted to say. And there are cases where you could say, if you too need help, if you need to get things off your chest. So yes, to say it to someone that you are very close to, and say it in a more a lucid way, not necessarily mention the name of the person. If you're talking to a therapist, or you're talking to someone that you are sitting down with, like you want to get your brother into a rehab center, or you want to get someone to talk to your brother, right? So then you have to mention that it is your brother because it's for the benefit of your brother, right? Or whoever it is. So regarding the person that's speaking, you're right. The person that's listening, right, doesn't know what the intentions of the person are, but the person that's listening also knows what their relationship with this person usually is, and they know if this is the person that if they usually call them up for when they really need help, or it's just we're catching up and we're just and he's just saying, and maybe they really want help and they're using an opportunity, but you're not the person that's usually doing that, so then you also have to be careful. Right, from your perspective. But regarding the person that's speaking, and I think that's more what Suzette was talking about, right? Yes, you have to be careful of how you say things and when you say things, right? Because speech is not free. I know we have a freedom of speech, right? But free speech is not free. You cannot say whatever you want according to the Torah, right? There is rules because if you are hurting someone, right, with your speech, you have to be careful. It has to be made sure that there's a legitimate reason why you're saying that. And we have the rules of Toelis. Bonnie. You good? Okay, Emily.
So I think that one of the things that might be helpful for people to think about is like, how would this person feel? Like, let's say, imagine you're the brother who's dabbling in drugs. You don't want people to know that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you want other people to know that. So, like I know, Suzette, you were saying that like, oh, it's a good friend and we should be able to talk about things. But like, if you were the person being spoken about, I'm assuming that you would want that information not to be passed along to your brother's friends or your sister's friends. Or I remember one time I was talking to some friends about my kids and about one of my kids, and one of the kids walked into the room and they said, "Are you talking about me?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're my kids. I can talk about you. I made you, like I could say whatever I want, like you're my kids." And then it was sort of like, and then I remember learning that you can't, like, why should I be able to say whatever I want just because they're my children? They also have a right to like privacy of their lives. And so I think that even though we want to be able to say what we want to our friends, you have to think about from the perspective of the person who's being spoken about. They don't necessarily want this information passed around. Like, it's not fair to them.
Very, very well said. Go ahead.
Can I comment? on that?
Please, yes. That's what I meant. Go ahead. I saw you on.
Oh, thank you. I agree. And I know last week, I'd mentioned that, I use the phrase, it's not my story to tell, so I shouldn't use it. But also when I read this, I read it and I know it's relevant to our times, and I read it and looked back at, when the great sages were writing this versus now when, there's so many other things to consider. And in this case, it could be a situation where something that is shared by the friend hearing becomes helpful to the friend who said it. And that information becomes even more helpful to the brother who needs the help. So just sometimes in our dialogue where we say something, we may get an answer that we didn't intend to hear, but it's helpful. I understand, and I agree, and I agree and I disagree, and I'll try to keep it narrowed to to this conversation. But I do think that the circumstance needs to be looked at carefully, and I also do think that it is a good framework for any dialogue that we're going to have. What is the intention of why we say it? And to Emily's point, I'm a big proponent of privacy, so I do agree with that.
Right, so just to sort of, I think, wrap up this conversation, if I may, it's a conversation not to ever end this conversation. Always happy to talk about this more, but just for our class, I think we're both basically all coming to a certain consensus. We might, vary a little bit on here or there, that privacy of other people, which really is the law of Lashon Hara, right? The laws of privacy is an old Jewish law in many aspects. If two people live next to each other, privacy of property and things like that, and also the privacy of information. That's really the idea of Lashon Hara on a deeper level. It's also hurting. It's more than just privacy. It's also hurting the other person by the information that you are saying. At the same time, if there's a reason, a purpose that you need to say this information, that you might get a better insight on how to deal with your brother or friend or whatever it is, or child, right? Or this person that you talk to might get hurt from this person, right? So if there's a toelas, and that's what we've been really talking about, different scenarios, right? If it's shidduchim, if it's a friend, if it's a business partner, if it's a community person, whatever it is, if there's a reason that you could deal with it better, that you need to get something off your chest, so that person will benefit that person or benefit other people, right? So then you have to look into the laws of toelas and make sure, and if there is, right, so then of course you're allowed to say something. And when you do say something, not every time do you need to give all the information, right? So that's why these laws, I don't want to say are complicated, but these laws are to a certain degree on a deeper level of intricacy of every scenario is different, right? So yes, of course, you need to get things off your chest. And of course, sometimes when you speak, you get a new insight. And of course, sometimes you're protecting, a friend or a potential match or a school or organization or a business partner or whatever it is, right? And you have, on the contrary, the obligation to say something. As we said, you're not allowed to stand aside while your friend's getting hurt, right? But that also has to work with that you can say something that will hurt someone else. So you have to look at every scenario, every case, and see where does it fall under, right? And if it falls under the scenario where you're allowed to say something, then you also have to say how much information are you allowed to say? How much information do you need to say? Let's say you need to get something off your chest. Let's say you want to get a new insight on something. So do you really need to say that it's your brother? Do you really need to say that it's this person? Maybe you're just talking about a general scenario. Maybe if they guess or they don't guess, that's up to them, right? But by limiting the information, you're still able to get, and sometimes no. Maybe it makes a difference because it's your brother, because it's your kid, right? So every case makes a difference. At the same time, right? We also have to be careful about what we say about other people. So I think that's just something to think about. Really, Suzette, thank you so much for bringing this this conversation up. I personally really enjoyed it, right? And I always love when we have this kind of conversations in our class. I really, really do. So thank you for bringing that up. So just to, what? Oh, sorry. We have from over here. Go ahead. No, 100%. That's what I was just going to get to, right? Right. So Sherry just pointed out that we haven't even got to the answer yet, right? And 100%, and that's what I'm getting to right now. Right. So we got a little off topic, and it was a great, not off topic. It was still, in the laws of lashon hara and what this case is. And thank you again for bringing that up. Right. But now let's get let's bring it back around to this scenario. So what's the halacha over here? You hear something and it's not toelis for you to hear, right? It's not, right? It's just some random friend that called you up. You're in an elevator and the person starts talking to you about, whatever, right? Or at Kiddush, and there's no need for you to know about this information, right? So what do? So the halacha is like this: listening to lashon hara, right, gives it a certain amount of believability, and therefore a person who pays attention to such stories transgress the Torah's commandments. Do not accept a false report. Right, listening to and speaking lashon hara both harm the subject of the report and are both considered lowly activities. Okay, so the idea is like this: what does the verse say? The verse in Shemot says, "Do not accept a false report." Right. So if you hear something, it's out of your control. Right. What can you do about it? Right. You're talking and a person threw something out. You're a kiddush and person. The question is, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? You're going to, I hear his brother, Chaim Yankel, right? Whatever, this family is that, and right? Are you going to start digesting it and reflecting on it and thinking about it? Even if you don't, maybe it's not true, but if you're still digesting it, so now you are to a certain degree accepting, right, this report. You're accepting what was said, right? Also, if you continue to hang around, right, and politely, you could very politely say, right, a person's continuing to talk and said, very polite, I'm just going to go refill my drink, right, I need to go talk to someone else, it was so nice to see you, right, change the conversation, said, but how's your, you remember the baseball games we used to play, as kids on the street, right, you could easily, change the conversation if you're not, and you're allowing this to continue, right, so that now you are, actively, passively, but actively, right, and allowing the lashon hara to continue. So now that's on you, right? So that's the halacha over here. You hear something. We have a concept, onus rachmana patri, right? If something's out of your control, right, God's not going to hold you accountable for that, right? If God forbid someone doesn't have arms, right, God's not going to say, you didn't put on film today, right? That's the same reason why, someone is, a lady's giving birth, right, on Shabbos, you have to drive to the hospital, right? Of course, right? There's laws of certain things are out of your control. And if someone drops something on you and you heard it, right? You can't take it back, right? That's unfortunate, that's life. The question is, how are you going to react to it? And what is your next step going to be, right? What is your next step going to be? And that is in your hands to do. So as we've spoken about in the past, different scenarios, different things, right? To reflect and to not believe, right, what was said, right, or not make it important, right? That information is not important. It's not anything that makes a difference to you. Could be yes, could be not, right? And then try to change the conversation. Try to avoid. Try to if you're a kiddush or you whatever outside. I have to go watch my kid. I have to get a drink or whatever it is. Try to, if you're not able to change the conversation, what do you do next? Will make a big difference. And I've done this many times, I'll be honest, right? And I've failed many times, unfortunately. We're all human, right? And we all have to continue growing. But, try and change the conversation. I'll bring up some random thing. This week's star portion, or, that's not usually random, right? But other things, look at the Jaguars, they won a game, right? And then everybody, yeah, the Jaguars won a game, right? And okay, let's make l'chaim, right? But, whatever it is, right? Some random thing that really sort of puts a stop to this conversation, that is within your power, right? But again, if you know that the person's coming to sit down with you, it's a good friend, and you're sitting say, hey, listen, you don't mind, I just need a couple minutes of your time. I need to let off some steam, and I really need to. And so he said, okay, that's cool, but let's just try to keep it within, if there's no need to say the name, let's not say the name, right? So then, of course, that's, again, even for listening, that's toelis, right? In a way of doing it in a proper way. So if there's no purpose for it, there's no reason for it, right? There's no toelis. And again, toelis doesn't mean to say it just makes you feel better, right? That depends on the scenario of what it is and what's not, right? That is something to always consider. So what you do next is within your power. And that's the halachas. Of course, you heard something and you can't do anything about that, right? But what your next step is, right, is within your power. And that's going to show what happened in the past, how you were dealing with that or not dealing with that. All right, so that concludes chapter 7. Right, just right. So just to conclude the day, just with what we started about. Right. Again, I think it's always something very important to always reflect and realize. And I think, again, if we think about this more, right, to every person, right, matters, right? Every person means something, right? Even if it's someone that hurt you, even if someone whatever, right? They have a life, right? And what you say might really hurt their lives, and there's no reason for that, right? Unless, again, if you're protecting other people, and even then you have to be careful how you say it, right? But every person, it's same way of saying hello to them, or the Beis Din, listening to their testimony, right? Also, thinking about them as individuals, right, and caring about them is also a good way of protecting ourselves from just needing the urge just to say something or just to get off your chest, because they might really get hurt from that. And again, if it's necessary, so then there's the rules of toelis. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're going to